Welcome everybody to the launch of our new guide to EDI and inclusion in PPI on behalf of the Rare Disease Clinical Trial Network and Health Research Charities Ireland. My name is Rachel Crowley. I'm an endocrinologist at St. Vincent's Hospital and I'm co-lead of the Rare Disease Trial Network. I'm joined today by Dr. Avril Kennan, by Charlene Young and by Dr. Cassandra Dinius on this launch today. And you're all very welcome. We're very excited about the amount of interest that we've had for the launch of this guide. So thank you very much to our funders, PPI Ignite at UCD Seed Funding, for supporting this huge piece of work that you're all going to hopefully benefit from today and in the future for a long time to come. I just wanted to go through a little bit of vocabulary as some scene setting so that everybody's comfortable before we get going. So when we say EDI, we're talking about both equity and equality, diversity and inclusion. So we're talking about giving people the opportunity to maximize their potential to participate as patient researchers and contribute to medical research. And what we mean when we say PPI is patient and public involvement. So this is members of the public and patients who are living with a condition who are acting as actual researchers, designers, sometimes even funders of research, and not the more traditional role that we think about where they're participants or maybe long-term beneficiaries of the research. So it's a really active process for our PPI researcher partners that we're talking about building into the guide. So just to give a bit of flag for housekeeping, the chat, I understand, is open. So you're all very welcome as we go along through to contribute to the chat. And we'll be keeping an eye on it and bringing up any questions for the Q&A panel at the end. And Linda, who's supporting us, thanks very much on the technical side. If you could launch the first poll. We want people to enter and answer, what do you see as the biggest challenge to improving equity or equality, diversity and inclusion in patient and public involvement in research? So there's not a huge amount of space to answer here. So if you could give us short answers, we leave that running in the background. And while you're all collecting your thoughts, I'd like to introduce Dr. Avril Kennan, who is the CEO of our partner, Health Research Charities Ireland, known as HRCI. And Avril is really driven by the belief that research transforms lives. And so she really has become a leading force in making sure that the voices of health charities and a lot of diverse stakeholders are central in all research endeavours. So it's a great pleasure for us to join us today, to have Avril join us today for this guide launch. Thanks very much, Avril.
Thanks so much, Rachel, and thank you for everybody being here. We hope it'll be a useful hour for you. I'm conscious that you can't see who's here, so there's about 140 people on the call. As Rachel says, do feel free to use the chat if you want to just say where you're coming from, give people a sense of who's in the room. And then as we go through, we can use it then for any questions that come up as well. So it's a real pleasure to launch this guide. It's something we've been working on for quite a while. There's three things that I would like to say about it before I hand back to Rachel. So the first thing is that this guide that you will be hearing more about over the hour and that you will get a link to after the hour is really practical. And that was something that was really, really important to us. In fact, the first line of the guide says, this guide is about turning the ideas of EDI into practical action. So EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion, is something that we have been thinking about for a long time in HRCI in relation to PPI, but also all of our activities. And more recently, we've been thinking collectively with our colleagues in the Rare Disease Clinical Trial Network about it. And what we've noticed over time is that there is lots of theory around this. So things like theoretical frameworks, but not so much in the way of practical guidance. So when this funding opportunity from PPI Ignite and UCD came up, we thought about, I guess, creating the guide that we would find useful. And I want to be really clear, this is not us saying, we know everything about this now and we've sorted it out and we're now imparting that wisdom with you. Not at all. We have thought about it a lot, but we are drawing on that, but we also are drawing on the wisdom of the crowd through a couple of workshops that we held on it, and through watching what other people do, and I suppose it's just a contribution to us all getting better at this. It's also really interesting that this collaboration we have with the Rare Disease Clinical Trial Network, I think, is really, really interesting. So through that, Cassie, who you'll hear from in a while, is employed by the network, but is also co-hosted by HRCI. And so we have this lovely cross-sectoral approach, which I think has helped to make it more practical for more people as well. The second thing I want to say is that it's not judgmental. The words "you must" are not in the guide, and I actually checked this just before I came on. The word "must" is not in the guide. And that's because we recognize that PPI can be very hard for all sorts of reasons. And then when you sort of add this layer of EDI on top of that, it can feel really, really daunting. I mean, I know this personally from years of work in this space. When I started doing PPI, when I was working with an international patient organization about 10 years ago now, I know that my focus was at that time to get a patient in the room for important meetings. And it was really only, and I guess at that time, there was a lot of misunderstanding about what PPI was. There was some resistance to PPI. Maybe there's still pockets of that now. And it was really only over time that I had to recognize that, okay, so maybe I got somebody in the room, but if they didn't have a good experience and if they weren't enabled to contribute, is that really PPI? And to this day in HRCI, our focus around EDI would be a little bit more on events. We're not ourselves doing a lot of PPI, but we're running events that we want to be inclusive. And I would say, honestly, we're not even close to where we want to be in terms of the diversity we want to have in the room. But again, we're working on it, we're building on it. And the third thing I want to say is that beyond not being judgmental, we hope that it's empowering. So the word "friendly" is in the title of the guide, and that's coming from Cassie. And so Cassie led on the writing of this, and you see that her language is very gentle and very empowering. The tips we think are really helpful. And also, I guess we're hoping that one thing that you might take from it is that sometimes we're doing more already than we realize. So, sometimes you have somebody around the table. So you've got Ben sitting around the table as a PPI partner, and Ben happens to be autistic, and Ben happens to be gay. And you think, oh, well, that's just Ben. And you think often diversity is something out there that we haven't quite reached yet, instead of maybe recognizing that Ben is already bringing a really valuable perspective because he is maybe experiencing the health system differently to how you are. I really hope there's nobody called Ben who's autistic and gay on the call, or that's going to seem really pointed. So we also hope that it's empowering. And as I finish up my piece, just to say that we're delighted to be doing this, to be launching this guide in Rare Disease Week, because as you'll hear a bit more of it, we have very much drawn from the perspectives of people living with rare diseases, because there's huge diversity in rare diseases. It's applicable to anybody interested in health research, but it is rare disease work, and we want to acknowledge that. A couple of plugs: the HRB, the Health Research Board in Ireland, are going to be launching a podcast this week sometime, particularly focused on rare disease research. And we won't distract you with it now, but towards the end of the session, we'll stick a link in to where that will come up this week. And the other thing that we'll share a link on towards the end is a Rare Disease Day video that our colleagues in EURORDIS, the European Rare Diseases Organization, have produced. And in that very short video, if you have a little bit of lunchtime left after this, it's really powerful, and I think you'll see the importance of EDI and inclusion through that. So I think we maybe are going to close the poll now, Linda. So we might just take a quick look at that between myself and Rachel and see what people are suggesting their challenges are. Okay, I'm not seeing that coming up. So Linda, I'll let you work on away on that in the background, and we can pick that up when we can see it. Um, and in the meantime, I'll hand back over to you, Rachel.
Thanks very much, Avril, for those very welcoming, warm words to everybody. I would comment that the chat is on fire with people putting in their backgrounds. There is a great sense of community coming through with this guide, which is really great to see. I think we all have something to bring to the table in discussion, so I really hope that people get engaged at the end of this session and bring all of this rich experience that's being reported in the chat. And also, of course, that you get to use the guide and put into action and hopefully feed back to Cassie how it works out for you all. Um, Linda, if there's anything you want to comment on the poll, I'm not seeing it either, Avril. Hopefully people have been able to write something into the poll.
Yeah,
Is
just to
it,
say 75 people have responded there. I think Cassie can actually see the answers.
do you want to park it, Cassie, and we'll keep moving and maybe open it for the Q&A? Would that be?
Yeah, that sounds great. We've got a nice word cloud here, as well as the short answers. And so we can take a look through this. I'll share it over to the other presenters.
Okay, great. So what we might do while everybody is digesting the feedback of that is move on to introduce Charlene Young. And it's great pleasure that Charlene has been able to join us today for this launch. She's a dedicated expert in engaging diverse communities in health research, and she focuses on ensuring that medical advancements are inclusive, accessible, and directly informed by the people that they are meant to serve, which I think is a great summary of what we're trying to do with this guide and with our research action generally. So you're very welcome, Charlene, if you'd like to share your experience and your thoughts with the group.
Thank you, Rachel. Can you hear me? Brilliant. So as Rachel said, I'm Charlene. My journey started actually when I was diagnosed in 2011 for a rare bone cancer, which was osteosarcoma. And I had half of my leg removed and replaced with metal. At the time, I was 27 years old. It was really traumatic. My son was 5 at the time. And as you can imagine, there wasn't much support groups during that time. And I think there was literally 0 PPI. So, going along the years, I, went through treatment, got back to the new me. And I realized that actually I want to get involved as opposed to sharing my story. I wanted to get involved in PPI, which I did by accident. And I realized that I really enjoyed the input of the patient as opposed to just sharing my story. I wanted to give more. But then on my journey within PPI, I realized that there wasn't much diversity in anything, in any types of groups or experiences. There wasn't much out there. And then I began to kind of research different groups and communities to find out, why are people not getting involved? Why is it just me in the room? So I started about 2 years researching this. And then I identified so much within this that I collaborated with a group called Diverse PPI, which created a tool for researchers to get involved within minority communities. So then I realized that this is actually bigger than just minority communities, not in a bad way, but the whole spectrum of EDI is very wide. And I realized that I prefer collaborating with groups and institutes that need assistance with this, as I realized that I'm really passionate. So I launched a workshop in Ireland in 2024 just to kind of test the waters. And I realized that, that this is something that we need everywhere. It's not just in the UK where I'm based. I'm hearing this, people are looking for so much inclusivity within groups, but just don't know how to reach out to different groups and communities. So I launched that. That was great. And I was able to collaborate and maintain relationships within Ireland and outside Ireland since doing that, which has led me here also. So I just wanted to go through at least 4 things why I believe that, inclusive PPI really makes a difference. So a lot of the times I see online researchers or events like this, webinars like this, and they're just discussing the patient, but there's no patients on their board, there's no patients in their groups, there's not even patients within the webinar. And it's really mind-boggling to me, because you're doing this for patients, but why are we not involved? So research with real people, for me, that's a huge thing. And it's not about including them at a particular stage. I think in the guide, I think there's a diagram that illustrates this. We need to include them from the start, from as early as possible, because I find that some researchers these days, they feel like, oh, we're in the lab and the patient doesn't need to be a part of this, or there's no input a patient could give. But actually, there's so much a patient can give, because we see things from a different perspective as beyond the clinical side. So yeah, research and with real people. Also, that addresses the inequalities that we face as rare groups. A lot of the time, identifying barriers as a researcher, going out there may seem very daunting, but actually you need to go out to these communities. You need to, reach out to people like me that can reach these communities also, and I find that this improves the study design also, and recruitment of whatever study you're taking part in or whatever project you're doing. Just things like lay summaries and the materials and just getting us involved. I get a lot of requests from students that, bless them, their lay summaries isn't very clear. And, having that input from the patient, we're really able to, give them that type of, that people feel like they have engaged with the community. So, yeah, and I'll say my last thing is building trust. That is huge. That is so huge. I've been able to reach out to people that have never taken part in research and have never wanted to do that. But because I've got a level of trust and, a level of collaboration and relationships, they're willing to overlook that and be like, you know what, Charlene, I will take you up on that offer. I will join that study, because they know that I've been able to build trust within certain organizations and groups. So, collaboration is key to this also. And it does inspire people. It does make a difference to your project as well, if you're a researcher also. But yeah, I think that's my 4 main takeaways, I think, from inclusive PPI.
Thank you very much, Charlene. I think particularly that point about trust really resonates with people that have worked in this field. It's something that you have to put time and effort and open-mindedness into building. But when you have it, it's very precious and it's very high yield in a project, in a working relationship. It's really, really key. And it is actually reflected in the answers that people gave in our poll, which Cassie and Linda have gotten through to me. So building trust and sustaining relationships was one of the themes that came out of the polling. So people are reflecting what you're saying. I mean, there is a lot of answers saying that this is just not very well resourced, and finding the time, finding the money to reimburse patients and members of the public for their valuable input, and making sure that there isn't a tokenism element to all of this, that some power is given back to patients or members of the public, whichever people are involved. That's really key. And another thing that's come through is a little bit you touched on in the beginning of what you said about how to reach out and engage underrepresented communities. So people even within rare disease fields who might not be represented. And one of the things that has come up in Ireland is that people who don't live near urban clinical centres would find it much harder to engage and contribute than people who are living near the hospitals that are doing a lot of work in this area. So I think it's very interesting to see that what people have said in the poll links very closely to what you've just said, Charlene. We may come back to that, I think, in the Q&A, if you are happy to comment again, Charlene, and Cassie might pick up on that. So it then gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Cassandra Dinius to give her formal title, referred to thus far throughout the whole webinar as Cassie, who will be known to many and who is the name on the invitation to this webinar email that you will all have gotten. So Cassie's described in her bio for this as a champion for inclusive research, a champion generally, I think it's fair to say. She is our PPI liaison officer, and as Avril already mentioned, we've had this novel working partnership between the Rare Disease Clinical Trial Network and HRCI that Cassie has been enabling and has made a really fruitful, rounded partnership that's yielding gains we never thought we'd see coming. She sees her role as ensuring that patients and their families have a meaningful voice in rare disease research. And she's dedicated to making science accessible, both to patients as researchers and to members of the public interpreting what's come out at the far end, and engaging with underrepresented populations for the reason that Charlene has just highlighted, and as you've said in your poll, is one of the drivers that led to the formation of this guide. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Cassie, who's going to talk through the guide itself. Thanks, Cassie.
Thanks so much, Rachel. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. It's really just going to be an opportunity sneak peek to see the guide, which I will email to everybody after. So is that showing up okay for folks?
It's showing, yeah, there it is.
Wonderful. Okay. So thank you so much for the very kind introduction. As Rachel and Avril have said, my name's Cassie or Cassandra Dinius, and I'm co-hosted between the Rare Disease Clinical Trial Network and HRCI. So I've been able to really learn so much from both of these sectors, and we're then able to leverage the best of both clinical and charity research as we learn across those sectors. And this guide is a direct result of that. We applied for funding together, we came up with this idea together, and we drove the initiative together. So this next 10 or 15 minutes is a sneak peek into this resource. And our hope, as Avril had said, is to take this high-level idea of EDI and concepts and frameworks and really support on-the-ground change with practical ideas. So to that end, the title of the guide is quite long, but we did want to say it's a friendly guide to EDI in PPI, but it's practical steps you can take today. So feedback from both the charity sector and as we were finding PPI partners within the network revealed this theme that there's a massive appetite for better equality, diversity, and inclusion, but people don't know exactly where to start. And taking that first step can be daunting. So we wanted to move away from theory and into this practical idea. And our hope is that the guide feels really human, really friendly. The design team at Catalyst wowed us in making it approachable. And our hope is that when you read through this guide, you'll feel like this is for you. So now go give one of these ideas a try, and it'll spur you into a bit of inspiration and action. So the idea around inclusion is how can we make sure that people feel welcomed, feel valued, and feel included in involvement activities. And as we've said, it was inspired by the rare disease community. This is a very diverse community. There's an intersection here of people who have different social classes, different ages, disabilities, ethnicities, severity of disease. So there's many different ways that diversity is represented in the rare disease community. And our thought is that if we can get it right for rare, it's right for everywhere. So this was inspired by rare disease, and what better time than to present this during the Rare Disease Week. So as Avril said, there were 2 workshops. where we gathered ideas from a variety of people. There were healthcare professionals, there were patients and public in the room, there were researchers, and we're really grateful to PPI Ignite at UCD for the funding to hold these workshops and then also to produce this guide. So in the guide itself, you're going to find more than 25 actionable ideas. And it's for people who might not have the time or the interest in reading a long, dense academic document. That's completely understandable. If you do want to read a long, dense academic document, we are writing up a academic manuscript that should be published shortly. So stay in touch for that if you would like to read the full details. This guide itself also has a quick reference for your wall. I actually have it as the background on my computer, and it shows all of those ideas in one easy reference. So each actionable idea has a format. There's the main topic, which you'll see in bold. There's a reflective question to get people to kind of consider the idea or the concept. And then we've tried to provide concrete first steps, practical ideas that you can implement. The ideas in the guide are organized into 4 sections, and I'll just dip into each of those sections briefly. The sections are inviting people into partnership, nurturing partnership, enabling partnership, and then honoring partnership. So starting off with this idea of inviting people into partnership, really the focus here is how do we reach people who aren't already in the room? And one way to do this is to use symbols of safety. So how can you demonstrate to somebody that you're an ally? And one way that this is quite accessible to do is maybe have pronouns in your email signature or a pride flag. These are really powerful symbols of a safe space. In this section, inviting people into partnership, you'll also see ideas like offering mentorship and support. We recognize that expertise flows both ways, so maybe we suggest providing resources like a welcome kit or a structured onboarding process. These are ways that people can be invited into partnership that is going to reach a broad audience. And then we have the second section, which is around nurturing partnership. So the focus here is once people are involved, how do we make them feel safe and valued? And the reflective question here, I think, is quite interesting. What message does it send if you can't find yourself in the drop-down menu? So this has happened, I know, a lot with charity partners as well. That can feel a bit alienating when we can't even find ourselves on the drop-down list. So that might be your gender, that might be ethnicity, that could be like your affiliation. And one of the questions that might pop up, if you can't find yourself in those options, you might wonder, am I really being welcomed? And am I really being considered? And if you have to choose other, you're actually othering that person. It feels a bit exclusionary. So maybe use language like self-describe. That would be great. We've got a whole tools and resources section in this guide as well to help signpost to some supports to help get you started. Other ideas around nurturing partnership might be having actions like planning for compensation or payment, as Rachel had said, for people's valuable time and expertise. But beyond compensation, also recognition. Payment's really important, and so is talking to people about how they want to be acknowledged. Is that something that publicly you acknowledge them? Is that a private thank you note? Being nominated for an award, invited to a launch event, being able to talk with people and say, look, of course, payment is something that is important. And also, how do we recognize that contribution that you've made and our partnership? The third section in the guide is around enabling partnership. So what we mean here is removing barriers. Those might be logistical barriers, they might be physical barriers. And how do we do that to better increase people's ability to be involved? So if you process information in a different way, maybe you require an interpreter or a screen reader, maybe you prefer materials to be written down instead of said verbally or vice versa, you might feel left behind. So one of the things that people really came forward in the workshops and shared a desire for is to provide materials in advance. And then also leave the door open for follow-on contact so that people are able to share their input at their own pace. We've also had a big learning here around digital tools. I've learned that Doodle doesn't always play well with screen readers. And so the big discussion here, because working with rare disease, oftentimes I get to work with people who have vision loss. And so we've had conversations, what works best when I'm trying to find your availability? And at least depending on your screen reader, but at least in our group, people have shown a preference for Google Suite over Microsoft Suite. So having these discussions is really important. Rachel had talked about geography, depending on where somebody's tuning in from. Maybe consider low bandwidth options that suit all internet speeds and not just people who have really fast, high quality internet. So have that conversation and inquire what works best for people. And then finally, we get to the section on honoring partnership. So the focus here is on recognition and closing the feedback loop. And it came up in the first poll, even when trying to be inclusive, you can run into issues around tokenism or representation. And so oftentimes the same PPI partners are relied on over and over again. And we really would suggest to spread that love by bringing in a variety of partners and rotating opportunities so that people don't get burned out. And this section also has actionable ideas around things like for longer term partnerships, asking, do you still wish to be involved? Sometimes availability or willingness to participate changes over time. This is especially true in the rare disease community where people can have periods of progression or chronic pain and they might need to step back a bit. So for us within the Rare Disease Clinical Trial Network, we offer ad hoc opportunities for involvement where our PPI partners can be involved for as long as they like, whenever it suits them, because we recognize making long-term partnerships can be especially challenging. So all of these ideas that I've talked about and much more are available as a standalone file. This is the handy summary I talked about for your wall. This has all 28 ideas. I have it as my computer background. It helps me to keep thinking inclusively. And the entire guide is hosted on the RDCTN and the HRCI websites. We also have it available as a Word version, which some people find more accessible. So I'll be sharing the links to you through email after this webinar. So without having, I know that's a lot of information, so to keep it from feeling too daunting, we just really encourage a light touch start. Begin with one change in your next involvement activity. Notice what works, celebrate those small wins, and just build from there. It's really about progress. It's not perfection. And like Avril said, you're probably already doing a lot better at this than you realize. One final practical idea that I'd like to share is if you're not already, try tracking and learning from diversity, thinking about who is and isn't represented, and that can help you to find gaps in inclusion. It can be a bit scary to think about getting things wrong, or I know I was really nervous about offending somebody. And so some phrases I try to use when working with people are, we want to make sure this works for everybody. From your experience, what's a good way to do this? And based on what we have to work with, what are your ideas or suggestions? Acknowledging that lack of resources that came up in the poll, right? Based on what we have to work with, based off of the hours available, based off of the budget, then what are your ideas? And I suppose it's really valuable, I think, to share your openness and for me to say, look, I'm a safe person to say no to. I'm a safe person to correct. I'm still learning. I want to do this well. And there's a lot of goodwill out there. And by and large, people are very sound. So showing these small, thoughtful actions can build that trust and inclusion that we know is so important. Now, in addition to the workshop input, we got input from many others as well. So we're really grateful for your time. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. I see some of you on the webinar today. Thank you very much. Our hope is that once this is out in the world, which should happen shortly in about half an hour, we want you to use this. Make it your own. We want to hear how it's helpful. I hope it is. So stay in touch. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Cassie, for the whistle-stop tour of what is going to be a very rich resource, I think, for people who are working in this area. And I suppose I'd like to just follow up again what you were saying towards the end. This can feel very challenging when people are starting off anew. I have found it very helpful to share when I'm working on the groups, when I'm not comfortable myself, when I'm a bit nervous about it. I must say, generally speaking, the people who are engaging with you from all sides, the researchers, doctors, scientists, other healthcare professionals, the patients, public members, representatives, if they're in the room, they're not bad actors. Everybody has been very open and supportive, bringing different perspectives. But it is okay to say, I really don't know what to do here. What does everybody here think I should do is a great start off point with this. And anybody can say that. It is a very intense meeting when that happens, I will say. But it's well worth going there, I would highlight. So thanks, as I said, for the whistle stop tour. I can see the huge enthusiasm popping up in the chat with everybody going, where can I get my hands on this right now? No pressure, Cassie. It falls to me to close this up and to thank Avril, Charlene and Cassie for their great contributions today, to our funders again at the seed funding PPI Ignite UCD, to Linda for technical support, and all of you for your huge contributions. And I would just comment as a very last thing, somebody put in a question at the very end there about where do you see the future of PPI? I think it's really bright. I would like to believe that people, at least in Ireland and elsewhere in our international collaborators, will use this guide, and that it may just be the first iteration of many. I think you should try, I think you should act in good faith and be open and realize that we're all part of a community trying our best together to achieve better results for patients across the world. That's the end goal. And PPI is just one of the many things we to engage in to get there. So thank you very much for your participation today. It's been great that so many people engaged. Over 150 people were involved in this webinar today, and more will get the links and the emails and the follow-up after. Thank you so much for your participation and engagement, and for all the work you're doing for patients. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.